Welcome to Wednesday, August 28th, 2024. And we're off and running. Fall shows are within a few weeks of dropping their pilot episodes, so I would say it's a rare time of the year that has something for everyone. I'm excited for the weekend. You've got starts on Thursday. That's the best part about being a football fan in the fall is the weekends start on Thursday nights. That's why you'll never catch me saying anything bad about Thursday night football or college games on Thursday nights, because I feel like it's a fast forward button to the weekend. Becomes a game of just make it to Thursday night instead of gotta make it to Friday. So it shrinks the week by a day. Got some big ones Thursday night too. UNC and Minnesota. The line's pretty close on that one. It's part of a new facet of college football that seems to be more common now, is the home and home series. You get a lot of schools that typically don't play each other who now, because of this, will play each other a lot. These two schools have been around for ever, and it only ever played each other once, and it was last year, where last year's meeting was in Chapel Hill. This year it'll be in Minneapolis, so each team gets a turn at being the home team. Same time that kicks off is the annual trap game. For whatever reason, a lot of schools keep scheduling NDSU as their opener, and they probably have the best rep for beating FBS teams of any FCS team right now, and it's kind of amazing that Colorado, of all schools, scheduled them, because I don't think there is a school with more pressure on them going into this season that Colorado has. I think they've got the talent, but I don't know that anybody would say that last year was what they expected out of Colorado. They no doubt dug themselves out of the mud that had been the last 20 years. Pretty much the entire time since Cordell Stewart was their starting quarterback. It's been dark days in Boulder. But this year is kind of a make or break year, because with the transfer portal, it's sped up the expectations. And Deion Sanders has his guys in there. Maybe not quite the full 4 years that we're used to giving college coaches before we really assess them, but at least 2. With the transfer portal, it's more like a free agency pool. Until that gets regulated, which I think it will within the next 5 years. I just think there's too much aimless wandering through the transfer portals for some of these kids, and I think some of them just use it as leverage, and I don't know if that's necessarily what it was intended for. Maybe to some extent, but not an abusive extent, as you see. And in the nightcap, you see Sacramento State take on San Jose State on True TV. True TV has covered college basketball for a while, but we haven't seen it do college football. Curious to see if they put their own spin on that, or if it's just like college basketball, where it just feels like a CBS telecast being put on True TV. And Friday night's game of the night is TCU versus Stanford. Both schools have struggled for quite a while now, so they're both hoping to turn a corner. Saturday starts off bright and early with a 9 a.m. kickoff between Clemson and Georgia. Get to see if Georgia looks like it has the last few years, or if they maybe take a step back with Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey now in the NFL. And then we get to see if Clemson has anything left. Kind of feels like the last few years we've slowly watched Clemson fall back to not quite mediocrity, but not an almost automatic national championship contender. So that's new territory for them. Most people have the game of the week as Florida hosting Miami. I'd have to agree. Anytime you start off the year with an in-state rival, that's always good. And you've got a Miami program that a lot of national critics are really high on. Florida with a lot of weapons. They're unranked, so they'll be gunning for Miami. I think that'll probably come down to the last few minutes. Always seems to with those two schools. Um, right after that is Notre Dame and Texas A&M. Two schools that are also right there on the edge. Gonna need a big game out of both because they both have pretty tough schedules this year. Can't really afford to lose a lot, but I know that the winner of the week is the fans. It's not lost on me that week 1 was very much like watching week 2 of preseason NFL games. You were strictly watching it for love of the game not that long ago. It used to just be almost unwatchable. Too many schools would schedule these schools to beat up on that. The game was over at halftime. Nobody in the stadium expected anything closer than maybe a 35-point gap in the final score. It got you through. It gave you your fix after a summer with no football. But it wasn't necessarily something you were specifically looking forward to. It's the kind of games that if those were week 7 or week 8, you probably flip to them for a series. And then after that, you watch the 17 other games that are also on at the exact same time that are much more entertaining. But this year, it starts out hot. You got 3 games that I think you clear the schedule for right away on Saturday. Got a couple games Thursday night that look really good. TCU, Stanford, probably give you an idea right away if there's schools you really want to keep a close eye on or if it's just same old for them. I think best part of this year is the 12-team playoff. I've been calling for a 12-team playoff since they instituted the 4-team playoff. To me, it never made any sense that a sport with 120 teams in it only allowed 4 teams to make the playoffs. There's 1 in 30. With the 12-team playoff, you'll still get 1 or 2 schools that get snubbed. There's going to be that 13th and 14th team that you wonder about, as there would be if it was a 50-team playoff. And with that note on college football, if you're looking for something to watch tonight before the games start tomorrow, Netflix released a new episode of Untold, which is definitely one of my favorite documentary series out right now. Not just for sports, but for anything. I just think the way that they produce it and the interviews they're able to get and the footage they get to go with the interviews is second to none. They have not put out a dud of an episode yet. They put out a new one called Sign Stealer. It sheds a lot of light on the game within the game and how much of a tactician some of these assistant coaches are and what they do throughout the week and then on game day that to the naked eye from the casual observer, they just look like some guy standing there trying to look important on the sideline when it is so much deeper than that. And I think this probably shed a light for a lot of people who have been watching college football their whole lives as to just how deep it really gets. My takeaways from it was the commitment to craft by Connor Stallions was second to none. He was as meticulous as anyone I've ever seen in just about any line of work, but definitely in the way of being an assistant coach that, essentially started out as somebody who just wanted an internship. I also found a lot of irony in the episode, specifically the relishing in the boogeyman role that just about everyone they interviewed seemed to have on the Michigan side of things, but it seemed as if not 5 minutes later, they turn around and very much seemed to be treating Ohio State as the boogeyman when it came to exposing Connor Stallions or shedding light on what he was doing. The legality of it it's tough. It's tough to decide where you draw the line. It drew a lot of comparisons to Spygate, which I thought was different. I think from what I gathered, Stallions at the Michigan games wasn't doing anything illegal, whereas going into the press box for the other team or the coach's box and stealing their plays out of the trash can, totally different. One just takes an insane amount of preparation and studying. The other is just walking up into an unlocked coach's booth and stealing plays right out of there. I think there's a very big difference between the two. But the advanced scouting was where I wasn't so sure. I did find it humorous that with as exciting of a life as he lived, he could not remember if he was at Central Michigan versus Michigan State. I don't know too many people who live a life so fulfilled and enriched that they're completely incapable of remembering if they were at a stadium with 100,000 people in it during a football game and on the sideline of that game disguised as someone else, but apparently he does. One way or another, though, you won't see another Connor Stallions with the in-helmet communication. I personally always wondered why the NFL did it, but the NCAA didn't. I think, to me, I like the uniformity. College football should just about perfectly mirror the NFL. I enjoy some nuances of it, the wider hash marks and stuff like that, but you look at college baseball versus MLB, it's the same game, it's just aluminum bats. So I like the uniformity, and in-helmet communication in the NFL has been a thing for got to be closing in on 20 years now. And just this year will be the first time NCAA has in-helmet communication. So I don't think there will be another Connor Stallions. If there is, it would have to go to a much further extent. Intercepting radio signals is essentially what it would come down to. But the thing I took away from it was how legitimate is Jim Harbaugh's tenure at Michigan now. He's championed as this perennial powerhouse of a coach. His track record looks great, but, and to his credit, he's a master at jumping ship right before the ship sinks. Everybody wants to point to how great he was at San Francisco, but they seem to forget how much of a train wreck the 49ers were after he left, and the roster turnover that happened shortly after that was going to happen, whether he stayed there or not. It was not pretty. They were bottom of the barrel, and with their recent success, it's easy to forget that. And with the success they had with him on the sideline, it's also easy to forget that, but it was not good there for a few years. And I think he had a lot to do with it. I think some of those players would have stayed, but the way he built that roster, it was built to win and win now, and they didn't, and he left for a place that prior to the last 5 years, Michigan didn't have very high expectations. It's been tough sledding there since you can go back as far as Lloyd Carr, but not a lot of success since their national championship. Now, with the national championship victory, there are different expectations coming into this year, and, agree or disagree with it, there was a lot of scandal and turmoil in the last few weeks of the season, and I think if Harbaugh was still there, it wouldn't have dissipated nearly as much as it has, and he jumped ship once again. the way he did in San Francisco. But it does make you wonder how much of the credit of the success should go to Stallions versus Harbaugh. It seems as though prior to Stallions showing up, that was just destined to be another slightly above average Big Ten team. Stallions shows up and you're looking at a national championship with relative ease. Outside of the Alabama game, there really weren't many close games for Michigan last year. So, obviously, Stallions, if you watch the documentary, he's not the kind to take a lot of credit for anything. It's just all about Michigan. But it does make one wonder what the career trajectories of each guy will look like now that they've gone their separate ways. But with that, there's a lot to look forward to this weekend and even more next weekend. But it does make me wonder, which game are you most excited for this weekend?